It was a quiet Friday night, a night so silent it almost felt unreal. The city lights had dimmed, the streets were deserted, and the faint flicker of a few street lamps barely cut through the darkness. Mark, a 28-year-old office worker, was driving home after another exhausting week of late meetings and endless deadlines. His body ached, and his mind was foggy, craving nothing more than the warmth and safety of his small apartment. The highway stretched out like a ribbon of black silk, flanked by trees whose shadows reached across the asphalt like long, grasping fingers. The tires hummed steadily beneath him, a sound that usually calmed him, but tonight it only heightened his awareness of the surrounding darkness. A cold wind whispered through the slightly open window, carrying the scent of wet leaves and earth, rustling against the car in irregular, eerie patterns. At first, the drive felt almost peaceful. Mark's thoughts wandered, imagining the weekend ahead. Then, from the corner of his eye, he caught the glint of headlights in the rearview mirror. He blinked, thinking it was another car merging onto the highway, but as moments passed, he realized the vehicle wasn't moving past him. It stayed behind, following at a precise distance, as if shadowing his every move. A chill ran down his spine. Mark's hand tightened on the steering wheel. "It's just another driver. Nothing more," he muttered, trying to reassure himself. He increased his speed, then slowed, even weaving between lanes, but the car remained at the exact same distance. There was no hesitation, no falter, just relentless pursuit. The night grew heavier, oppressive. The trees leaned closer to the road, their branches scratching at the moonlight, forming grotesque silhouettes across the asphalt. Each flicker of light and shadow seemed to move with intention, and the wind carried sounds that weren't there moments before. A snap of a twig, a whisper of leaves brushing against each other. Mark's heart pounded. Each breath felt sharp in his chest. His imagination spiraled. Was the driver drunk? A stalker? Someone who had been watching him all week? He gripped the wheel harder, feeling every vibration, every bump, as if the car itself was warning him of something unseen. Minutes stretched into eternity. The headlights behind flickered, once, twice, a pattern almost deliberate. Mark squinted, trying to interpret it, but could not. Then the rational part of his brain tried to calm him. Maybe it was nothing. But deep down, a terrifying thought struck him. What if it wasn't following him to harm, but to warn him? He approached a long, empty bridge. The car behind blinked its lights rhythmically, insistently. Mark's stomach turned cold. He slowed, hands trembling, every nerve screaming. The wind carried the sound of tires on asphalt like a distant drum, echoing his rising panic. Finally, he reached his apartment complex. He parked hastily, heart hammering, legs weak. The other car stopped a few yards behind him. His breath came in short, sharp gasps, fogging up the windshield. Mark stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath his shoes, and noticed the driver waving frantically, shouting words he couldn't quite hear. Then, clarity hit. "Check the back seat. Don't go inside yet." Mark froze. Slowly, he turned toward the back seat. There, crouched in the dim glow of the dashboard, was a man holding a knife, eyes wide with desperation and panic. The driver had saved him, and Mark realized how close he had been to a fate he couldn't even imagine. He exhaled slowly, knees trembling. The driver stayed, explaining that he had seen the man climb into the back of Mark's car earlier that night. The relief was overwhelming, yet Mark couldn't shake the lingering fear. the realization of how fragile safety truly was in the dark.
What would you do if someone warned you like that in the middle of the night? Would you trust a stranger or run?
It was a chilly October evening, the kind where the wind seems to whisper secrets through the trees. Emma, a 25-year-old photographer, had been driving all day through winding forest roads to reach a remote cabin she had rented for a weekend getaway. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving the forest bathed in a grayish twilight, shadows stretching unnaturally between the trees. The cabin appeared suddenly, a small wooden structure tucked between towering pines. Its windows were dark, reflecting nothing but the fading light. As Emma parked her car and stepped onto the gravel path, a shiver ran down her spine. The air was heavy, scented with pine and damp earth, and the distant rustle of leaves sounded almost like footsteps. She unlocked the cabin door and pushed it open. The interior smelled of dust and aged wood. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a small, worn living room with a fireplace and creaking floorboards. For a moment, everything felt quiet, almost peaceful, but there was an underlying tension in the air, a sensation that the cabin itself was watching. Emma placed her camera bag on the floor and moved to the window, pulling aside the tattered curtain. The forest outside was dense and dark, each tree branch swaying as if alive. She told herself it was just the wind. Yet, a faint tapping echoed from the upper floor. Her heart skipped a beat. The tapping grew louder, irregular, like footsteps pacing back and forth. Emma's pulse quickened. She gripped the flashlight tighter, scanning the room. Nothing. She told herself it was probably an animal, maybe a squirrel or a raccoon, but the sound continued, deliberate and rhythmic. Cautiously, she ascended the creaking staircase, each step groaning beneath her weight. The tapping followed her, moving in sync with her steps. At the top, a long hallway stretched into darkness, doors slightly ajar. The air was colder here, and her breath fogged in front of her. She reached the door at the end of the hallway. Her hand hovered over the knob, trembling. Slowly, she turned it. The room inside was empty, but the tapping intensified, coming now from the corner. Emma aimed her flashlight, and in the dim light, she saw it. A small old wooden box rocking gently, as if moved by invisible hands. A sudden gust slammed the door behind her. Emma spun around, heart racing. The flashlight flickered, and in that brief darkness, she felt a presence behind her. She whirled, shining the light. Nothing. But when she looked back at the box, it had stopped moving. Silence enveloped the room. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, but curiosity held her frozen. She reached for the box, hesitating. The moment her fingers brushed the wood, a whisper echoed. "Leave now." Emma stumbled back, almost dropping the flashlight. The air grew icy, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Shadows seemed to twist along the walls, moving independently of the light. She fled down the stairs, tripping over the last step, heart pounding in her ears. Outside, the forest was dark, silent again, but she could feel eyes watching her from the trees. She sprinted to her car, fumbling with the keys. Once inside, she locked the doors, slumping against the seat, sweat and fear mingling. Emma drove away as fast as she could, glancing in the rear-view mirror. The cabin stood silently behind her, unassuming, but she knew something had been there, something that had been waiting. If you were alone in that cabin, would you stay or run? What would you do? It was a rainy Thursday night, and the city streets glistened under the reflection of neon lights. Sarah, a 27-year-old graphic designer, had just returned from a late shift at the studio. She lived alone in a high-rise apartment, and the familiar sound of rain tapping against the windows usually comforted her. But tonight, it felt different. As she stepped inside, shaking off her umbrella, she noticed the apartment seemed colder than usual. The lights flickered briefly, and she frowned, blaming the storm. Dropping her bag by the door, she headed to the kitchen to make herself some tea. While waiting for the kettle to boil, a strange feeling crawled over her skin, the sensation of being watched. She shook her head. "It's just the shadows," she whispered to herself, but the unease lingered. As she sipped her tea, a soft thump echoed from the living room. She froze. The room was empty, or so she thought. She set the cup down slowly, each step heavy, moving toward the source of the sound. The floor creaked under her weight, amplifying every noise. In the corner of her eye, a shadow shifted. She spun, but nothing was there. Her heart raced, every nerve screaming for her to leave, yet curiosity rooted her in place. Another thump, closer this time. She felt it, a presence, just beyond the light cast by her table lamp. Sarah grabbed her phone, ready to call someone, anyone, but the battery was dead. Panic set in. The shadow moved again, subtly, yet deliberately, brushing along the walls, stretching and twisting unnaturally. She backed into the hallway, trying to calm herself, telling herself it was a trick of the storm, the flickering lights, anything, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. The air grew colder, heavier, and the shadow seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Suddenly, the apartment door clicked, locked from the inside. Her pulse surged. She spun, aiming the lamp at the entrance, and saw it. A dark silhouette standing still, watching. She couldn't see a face, only the outline, but the weight of its gaze pinned her in place. Seconds stretched into eternity. Sarah's breath came in short, sharp gasps. She whispered a desperate plea into the empty room, hoping the shadow would leave, but it didn't move. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, it began to approach. Her mind raced. Should she run, hide, scream? Each option seemed impossibly dangerous. Finally, summoning every ounce of courage, Sarah grabbed a heavy chair and threw it toward the shadow. The figure dissipated instantly, as if it had never been there. The lights flickered back to normal, the room was quiet, and for a moment she thought it was over. But as she moved toward her bedroom, the shadow returned, this time reflected faintly in the window, standing just behind her. She shivered, realizing some things in the night are never truly gone. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you in your own home? What would you do?